Welcome back. Happy Valentine's Day. We got 20 minutes left on a Valentine's Day special, and we're going to talk passion, huh, Kevin? Kevin Daniels is back, owner of Northwest Resumes, one of the top choices of executives at Microsoft, Amazon, Starbucks, and Boeing. Welcome back, Kevin.
How's it going, Ben? Thanks for having me again.
My pleasure. So you had brought to our attention this theme of kind of passion and passion ideas as it comes to really finding those jobs.
Right. Well, when I work with people, when I do the interviewing part of when I'm interviewing them to find out about their careers and what they want to be doing going forward as they create their new documents for self-promotion, essentially, one of the really important exercises in that is to get them to, try to get them to get in touch with what are your real passions work-wise? What moves you as a professional? What were the times, and sometimes I ask that, and it's kind of a tough question to answer right off the top of somebody's head, and they ask me to help them, like, what do you mean? And a great way to sort of do that exercise is to try to think back at a time in your career in which you felt the most connected to the work that you were doing, and try to figure out, when was that, what was I doing, and what was it about what I was doing that made me feel connected to it.
And I mean, this kind of puts you on that track where you don't hate going to work every day.
Right. And that's a good point. And that's the goal, because presumably if somebody is leaving an existing position, not everything about what they were doing was to their satisfaction or they were passionate about. So they're trying to get into something, hopefully, that is more in touch with, one would assume, with what, moves them and what they're passionate about. So being able to get in touch with that is huge, in being able to create a section in your resume or maybe a part of your cover letter that really clearly conveys that.
And this is beyond your hobbies section.
Right, exactly.
Because I think that
right.
The old way is the hobbies section. Right?
Right.
Here's what I like to do.
Right. Which is another a good point, because that when I work with people on interview coaching, not to go off like on a little mini tangent here, but when I work with people on interview coaching, I go over how to answer certain specific kinds of questions that you tend to get in interviews that are kind of the time-honored classics. And one of those is, tell us a little bit about yourself. And the instinct for a lot of folks is to talk about, things other than work. And really, the rule of thumb is to stick to work. That's why you're there doing that interview. So talk about work. Talk about, even if they ask you, tell us about your personality. Talk about your personality as it shows up in the workplace.
Now, and I could definitely see that making a difference, because if you think, well, I love to go out and have a good time at happy hour. And,
right.
Or all these things that take you away from work, you could see that as maybe not being the driving factor to hire somebody.
Right. Or if you start delving too much down that road of talking about your personal life, you then open yourself up, sometimes unwittingly, to certain forms of hidden discrimination. In other words, there are certain questions that an employer is not even allowed by law to ask you. And if you start talking about yourself maybe a little bit too much, you might divulge something about your religion or your political whatever affiliations, or something that doesn't have anything to do with work and is not necessarily relevant to the topic. So,
well, I think even driving back though to this passion part, if you're finding and interviewing for the job that you're passionate about, that's going to be a lot easier to stay on that focus.
Right.
Because if it's something you don't want to do, it's
right.
certainly going to be harder to find the things about you that drive you.
Right.
You had talked about a little exercise that people can do to kind of figure out, as you say, turns your crank.
Right. Well, yeah, that's kind of what I was talking about, is just trying to get in touch with that time in your career, what you were doing. It might have been one specific thing you were doing in a particular job. It might not have been that entire job. It might have been one particular thing that you used to do that you were really passionate about doing. An example, let's say you were...
So as an exercise, you could just pick one or two things.
Absolutely, because it could be like training. Let's say you were in some job 5 years ago where you managed personnel, but part of what your responsibility was training. And let's say you'd forgotten how much you really enjoyed that, And why did you really enjoy it? Well, because I really felt like I was making an impact on someone's career and helping them find, sort of their passions. And I love doing that. I'd like to do that more. Sometimes getting somebody in touch with something like that takes them into another career path entirely to where they become a trainer. That's what they end up doing. So it's just, but the other thing that I was going to bring up too is there's kind of a fine line with the whole passion idea though, when it comes to this whole job searching thing, because you want to get in touch with that, but you don't want to become too transfixed on that concept, because then you find yourself talking about your own desires too much, let's say in the interview or in the resume or in the cover letter, whereas you want to find things that you're passionate about that are hopefully in line with what that employer is looking for and what matters to them, as opposed to just talking about something that doesn't necessarily have to do with the specific job that you're seeking. I
mean, you could love training, and as in your example, and the position maybe isn't really a trainer, but you start getting in, and all of a sudden you've now painted yourself into a corner that isn't even for the job you're there for.
Absolutely. And then another way that you can sort of get into a red flag situation when it comes to this whole identifying your passion concept is you might find a company or organization that you feel is so in line with what you're passionate about. Like, I'll just give one example. Folks who are in the nonprofit sector that I work with all want to work for the Gates Foundation. Great place to work, great organization, but they make the assumption that this is like the greatest place in the world before they even go and interview, or they think it's the place for them, or it has the job for them before they really investigate it or whatever. And I'm not picking on that. I'm not saying that Gates is an example of one. I'm just saying that's an example of one that people tend to make that decision before they even look into it.
It's like wanting to work for Microsoft 10 years ago.
Exactly. So it's like it has to be the whole idea of looking for a job has to be it's a time of discovery every bit as much for you as it is for the people who are examining you as a potential employee. It's your job to find out whether that place or that job is the right fit for you. And you do that by asking the right questions in the interview and not making assumptions.
It would seem that a lot of people, and we do have to go to break here in just a minute, and we'll have you back after just to go with everybody. But it seems that a lot of people probably don't go into interviews with a plan on how to maybe, sell themselves in the right way. They're just going to go in and maybe they have some ideas of answers.
Right.
But are they really just saying the answers they want, or are they saying the answers that might get them the job? And I got to imagine that's a big part of this coaching.
Absolutely. Yes. And again, it's, when we talk about the certain kinds of the types of questions that you'll be getting, and then some specific questions you're likely to be getting. Another one of those specific questions has to do with, it's the classic one, is tell us about your greatest weakness, right? And what people tend to do is tell that person what they think they want to hear. And it comes off as not being genuine. So the great example of that is I'm a perfectionist. Like 9 out of 10 people will say I'm a perfectionist because they're thinking to themselves that they'll think that isn't really a minus. They'll think that's actually.
So what is the proper answer? I mean, what's the answer?
The proper answer is to actually be honest and talk about something that you've identified as a shortcoming, but you can within your answer itself, you can make the majority of that answer positive even while you're talking about a negative. Don't really have the time to kind of go into sort of how that is done right now, but it's a matter of sort of sandwiching that negative around a couple of positives. So if, for instance, like let's say you were, you recognize you weren't the most organized person in the world. You noticed that yourself. You went and took a class at a community college on how to be more organized in the workplace. Your boss noticed that you've become much better in that area and mentioned it in your last performance evaluation or something like that. Almost all of that story is positives, yet it's talking about a negative. So there's a way to spin things so that you can actually talk about something that might be a weakness, but make it, seem more on the plus side.